Hi everyone, this is Syrian Girl, with a Syrian perspective on what is happening with the Black Lives Matter movement in the US, and the parallels that I can draw from what happened in my own country, Syria. I have no horse in this race. Both the Democrats and the Republicans want to continue the illegal occupation of Syria, so this is my unbiased expert opinion. This is a color revolution. Even though it's true that the American police have a brutality problem because they have been trained by Israel, even though it's true that George Floyd was killed in a cold and nonchalant way, and even though it's true that Trump is an incompetent Zionist who isn't worth defending, it's still true that this is a color revolution, which means it's not going to overthrow the establishment or enact positive change. It's going to be hijacked for an establishment agenda. Have you ever noticed that Black lives only matter before an election? Then after the election, they don't seem to matter anymore. There's an election coming up and Biden needs the Black vote. He said so himself on the 21st of May, a few days before George Floyd's death, which occurred on the 25th of May.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump and you ain't Black,
they ought to call the movement Black Votes Matter. In fact, if you go to the Black Lives Matter website and click on the donate button, it takes you to Act Blue. Act Blue's top expenditures in 2020 were to the DNC, the Democrats. Another piece of evidence that this is a color revolution is that the establishment media has been stoking racial tensions for months. In fact, there were a few other incidences the media highlighted before they ran George Floyd's story. There was the Central Park Karen, which compared to George Floyd's death seems so petty now. You even wonder why the media chose to highlight that story out of all the things that were happening in the US. Especially since it ran on the same day that George Floyd was actually killed, the 25th of May. Then there was the Ahmaud Arbery story. The media picked that one up 2 months after Ahmaud's death. I think the media were going through all the police reports with a fine-tooth comb, looking for something to use to racially incite people and direct their anger towards Trump. Obviously, they had a lot to work with. It's interesting that they can even use these events to target Trump because under the Democrats, police were also killing people without any negative repercussions. Lest we forget, 12-year-old Tamir Rice and Eric Garner were both killed by police under Obama's presidency. Black lives didn't matter then. In fact, the police officer who killed George Floyd also killed a Native American man years prior and was let off by a Democrat prosecutor, Amy Klobuchar. The Democrats destroyed an African country, Libya, and helped the rebels sell Black immigrants as slaves, and it all happened under an African American president, Obama. Black lives didn't matter then. Now Obama, the war criminal, is being bought out of the attic as the savior of Black lives and Biden's backer. There's obviously some tension already going on behind the scenes because on the 16th of May, Trump reopened the Obamagate controversy. None of this is a coincidence. Another piece of evidence that this is a color revolution is that the establishment media, like CNN, has been supportive of the protests. They support them in a way that waters them down and corrals them to something that isn't a risk to the establishment. However, at the beginning, it did get a bit out of their control when they were setting fire to CNN, for example.
I just threw something on fire, Chris, a firecracker. Something's on fire!
At that time, the media started blaming Russia. But neither Russia nor China have the financial or logistical means to cause an uprising in the US. Both China and Russia are sitting back and watching in awe as the US does a color revolution on itself. The scenes of police brutality against protesters in the so-called home of democracy highlighted the hypocrisy and exceptionalism of US imperialism that has destroyed nations on the pretext of bringing people freedom. It's funny to see conservatives who supported the violent Hong Kong protests be against protesters now. Some acknowledge that the recent events have undermined the narrative of moral superiority that neocons use to destroy nations, but the spin doctors at the Atlantic are already trying to claim the opposite. So I don't think the establishment believes that these events will undermine their wars at all. Another sign that this is a color revolution is that both Hollywood and multiple corporations are backing it. They all took part in the blackout, where they changed their profile picture to a black square. This doesn't just happen organically. It didn't happen for the children of Yemen who are starving to death right now due to a US-backed Saudi war. It isn't happening for Syria, whose people have currently run out of basic medicines like Tylenol because of US sanctions. It has never happened for Palestine. We are only allowed to care about what they tell us we can care about, and only in a very controlled manner. While the current focus of the movement is tearing down statues of colonists of the past, the US's greatest ally, Israel, is preparing to colonize what's left of Palestine with the West Bank annexation. Even if individuals in the Black Lives Matter movement cared about this stuff, it hasn't been made a focus. The truth is, if Black Lives Matter focused on AIPAC and its wars, they'd be shut down very quickly. In 2016, Black Lives Matter joined forces with the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, an anti-Israel initiative. As a result, they found that their benefits were being cancelled.
I don't know if you saw, but this club, ditched a Black Lives Matter event. One of our donors, we just put in a call to him and then he put in a call to the police.
Since then, it seems Israel has been able to infiltrate the Black Lives Matter movement. Leaked videos from 2018 shows Israeli diplomats boasting about how they managed to get to the leaders of the Black community and hijack the movement with, "They can be part of our doing and activities."
The major problem of Israel is with the young generation of the Black community. Black Lives Matter starts there. I had last week a sit-down dinner at my house with 40 people, which are considered the leadership of the Black community, and the very important people. They can be part of our doing an activity.
I know color revolutions and how they work because I saw one happen in my own country, Syria. The media labeling protesters peaceful when they're not, the sectarian undertones, cops getting killed, protesters getting killed, churches burning, and the looting. In Syria, not only did the US-backed rebels loot people's homes, they looted the factories. And they didn't just loot the products inside the factories. They looted the equipment that makes the products. They looted Syria's history, priceless artifacts that are thousands of years old, and sold it on the black market. And now Antifa and the autonomous zones. American and European Antifa also tried to create an autonomous zone in Syria. They called it Rojava. They did this by fighting alongside the YPG, a Kurdish, self-proclaimed anarcho-Marxist militia, which the US military also fights alongside, even though they have it listed as a terrorist organization. They believe they are creating an anarchist socialist utopia. In reality, they're behaving as the foot soldiers for Israel's Oded Yunon plan to balkanize Syria and prevent it from accessing its own resources, such as oil and wheat. I warned for years that they would go to Syria, get military training, and eventually try to replicate their revolution in the West. In fact, the people behind the Chaz Autonomous Zone say they are using Rojava as a template. Now, Trump claims he will label Antifa as a terrorist organization, yet the US military is still supporting them and the YPG in Syria. When Trump tried to pull out of Syria, all the liberal Zionists kicked up a fuss about the poor anarcho-communist groups that would be abandoned. Of course, he capitulated and is currently occupying Syria's oil fields. It is important for the Zionists to glorify Rojava to the left, where ethnic cleansing of non-Kurds, such as Arabs and Syrian Christians, has been happening. It is their bleeding heart story to maintain the empire's occupation of Syria. This has been decades in planning. The ideological force behind the Occupy Wall Street movement, the CHAZ Autonomous Zone, and the Syrian Kurds was a Zionist by the name of Mari Bookchin. He was especially influential to Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan, who is listed as a terrorist by the United States. In fact, Israel was built on anarcho-communist autonomous zones called kibbutz. Even before World War II, European Zionists came to Palestine as illegal immigrants and began living off these kibbutz. Joseph Trumpeldor, who later became a hero of the Israeli right, declared himself an anarcho-communist. Noam Chomsky was part of the Zionist kibbutz movement, and unsurprisingly, he calls for the US occupation of Syria to be maintained in order to create a Kurdistan. So, they are repeating the template they used to create Israel, to create a second Israel called Rojava, Kurdistan, in Syria. And now, they're doing it in the US, for reasons that are perhaps not yet clear, other than that maybe they want to recruit more sympathizers and foot soldiers for the occupation of northeast Syria. Or maybe Israel's plans is to throw the US away once it moves towards China. But after all is said and done, what is the alternative? Trump? No one has groveled at the feet of Zionism more than he has. Probably the only reason they hate him is he has been honest about the US's real motivations in the Middle East and perhaps a few domestic policies. The truth is, if you are demoralized about the left-right, Democrat-Republican, Biden-Trump false choice, that's a good thing. It's time Americans realize that the elections are not going to change anything. Nothing is going to change until everything changes. This has been Syrian Girl. Please subscribe for more news and analysis. And if you like, support me on Patreon. Thank you.